The past holiday weekend was also move-in day for thousands of college students for city departments. This was a prime time to check on building conditions and also traffic control and trash removal. To tell us how things went this year in Boston is its Commissioner of Inspectional Services, William Christopher. Thank you very much for being with us, Commissioner. This was a real nightmare in past years. There were still some challenges, but this past weekend, how did it go?
It went very, very well. This past weekend is a classic example of what happens when the administration, the mayor, first looked at this 4 years ago, said this issue cannot continue. Collided all of the city departments, the universities, the landlords, and we've been really working together. The past 2 years have been much better. But this year was really the culmination that the plan does work. And the essence of the plan was to move student start dates at the university over a broader spectrum, as well as working with the landlords to rewrite their leases. So the concentration of what was a 3-day event 5-6 years ago is now a 3-week to a month event.
No, I mean, I have to admit, I've seen that around Mission Hill. I mean, there are people moving out at the end of July or the middle of August. So I guess this is what happens, right?
Well, what we did was after the first year, every violation that we had written, and there were hundreds, we had each one of those landlords come to meetings at Inspectional Services Department. We meet monthly with the landlords and the universities. And it's a discussion forum. It's not to whip people or go over violations. It's to define what our expectations are under the sanitary code and under the building code, to work with the universities so that we can deal with some of their problems, issues. And it turned out during the course of that meeting, one of the landlords had described, my question to them was, can we move the leases? Originally the leases were written that at 12:15 on the 31st, the lease would end, and the new lease would begin at 12:15 on the 1st. Which created absolute chaos because of students moving in, students moving out simultaneously. So the landlords were able to work, 3 days to a week in between the beginning and the end of each lease, which allowed Inspectional Services to get in 3 weeks before the great weekend and start doing our inspection standards for the properties. I'm happy to report that there was one housing and one building violation written this weekend, and it was in South Boston. It was not in the Gap or Mission Hill or other Fenway. There were no displacements of students. The universities were very well prepared. Boston Police did a tremendous job negotiating the redirection of streets. ISD and the fire department were out as teams, doing more of an informational campaign this year as opposed to a violation campaign. Working with students to allow them to know what services the city has available to them, how the city wants to help them. Very, very positive. Public Works, they still had their work cut out for them. It's still around 11 tons of debris that's picked up. And Alston Christmas wasn't much of a Christmas this year.
Why was that? Because it's just your students moving in?
Well, I think it's because everything was spread out a little bit. It wasn't the big event that everybody flocked to. I was in the Gap on Saturday, and there was furniture out. DPW was in doing their job to remove things. But it wasn't like in years past where that trash would be out there for 2 or 3 days.
And of course, the advice for people who see a mattress and think it might be good to scoop it up, maybe they should think twice?
I would think so. Bed bugs are something that can hide very deeply into the mattress. If you have a real situation and you need a mattress that bad, I'm sure we can figure out some way to get you a mattress. But I saw many pieces of furniture that I thought were attractive and things that I would like to bring in. But with the fear of bed bugs, I would never recommend anybody to pick up any of the furniture.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Boston's Commissioner of Inspectional Services, William Christopher. Move-in day used to be a great time to get into apartments if people had a complaint, but the city has a process that's supposed to be more preventative and proactive with rental registration. Has that changed things at all? Tremendously.
We see a great reduction in what we call reactive inspections, which are those inspections that are complaint-based. And the proactive inspections are the ones around the rental registry, which are scheduled throughout the year. And we're seeing a great shift in those, so I would say the answer is yes. Rental registry has had a tremendous success.
What about where students are living now? Before it was Alston, Brighton, the Fenway, Mission Hill mainly, but do you see that pattern changing in some way?
Yes, we started noticing it 2 years ago. We do a heat map every year of from the Student Accountability Report, which is a document or a series of documents that the universities, at the mayor's request, submit to us, I believe it's in October, where they give us the addresses of off-campus students. No names, so there's no violations of privacy, but just so that we can understand the housing characteristics throughout the communities. We saw some migration the first year. I'm waiting this year because I know that from the reports of our inspectors that were out in the field, we saw a much greater influx across the entire city. South Boston, the North End, Dorchester. These are all areas now that are seeing more student housing. In lesser numbers, but still their presence is there.
You know, most colleges and universities have to provide this information to the city about the locations of students, though not the names. UMass Boston has a different classification, I guess.
UMass is, as you know, is they're growing. It's gone from a commuter school now to a resident school, which I think is a great thing. I think it'll help fortify a lot of neighborhoods. UMass has done a very good job about building their dormitories. So the majority of their housing is on campus. We're not as concerned about those as we are the students that live off campus. I'm sure, in the next weeks or so, we'll be in touch with the chancellor, and I'm sure we'll ask for that information, anything off campus. And they're very good partners, as all the universities have been with us.
Finally, one other thing about move-in day. You have a lot of people out from ISD talking to the students as they move in, and I guess you give them some information about things they got to do to avoid the violations. What kind of things do you expect from students?
Well, the first thing is that we want to let them know that 311, the mayor's hotline system, both on a landline and online, and through a smartphone, of course, is a great resource that we can give you a ton of information in a very short order. Students, we ask you to be respectful. That's all. Be a good neighbor. The interior care of your unit is important because there are health standards that have to be met. If the students have questions, and this was the message we were telling them, we'll gladly come out and talk to them and show them the different things that take place. Smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, very important things. The responsibility of the landlord to install them, but students should check the batteries, make sure they're working. And we also ask them to avail themselves of the egress patents out of their unit that they're living in. Sometimes the second means of egress is not a doorway, but it's through a window. And we ask them when they first move in, that's something that you should etch into your brain. You don't want to wait till there's a situation and it's panic. So it's more just be a really good neighbor. The mayor has been adamant. He wants the students to have a great educational experience here in our city. He wants them to experience our city. And then leave it up to us to take care of the behind-the-scenes things so that they can have that good experience.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
William Christopher, the Commissioner of Inspectional Services. We'll have more news in just a moment.